Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Our prayer this morning is by Gary Kowalski. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all. Maybe it means just listening, unplugging the TV, turning off the computer, quieting the mental chatter and distractions. Maybe it means listening to the birds and the insects, the wind in the leaves, the creaking and groaning of the trees, noticing who else is out there, not far away but nearby, sitting so still we can hear our heartbeat, watch our breath, the gentle whoosh of air, the funny noises from our own insides, marveling at the body we take so much for granted. Maybe it means listening to our dreams, paying more attention to what we really want from life, and less attention to all the nagging, scolding voices from our past. Or maybe it's all about listening to each other, not thinking ahead to how we can answer or rebut or parry or advise or admonish, but actually being present to each other. Perhaps if we just sit quietly, we'll overhear a peace whispering through the centuries that's missing from the clamor of the moment. Maybe prayer means listening to the silences between the words, noticing the negativity of space, the vast, undifferentiated, and nameless wonder that underlies it all. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all, but listening with the heart to the angel choirs all around us. Those who have ears, let them hear.
The psalm is dedicated to courageous hearts, specifically the people that we honored this weekend, Kevin Hume, Mark Adams, and Catherine Russo, who honor us with their incredible work. It is also dedicated to Greta Thunberg, the most courageous heart I have ever seen. Imagine floating alone, a boat out at sea, reflecting the caramel sun of possibility. Like taking a familiar book off the shelf, investigate the open space of yourself. Listen to messages swirling in the eddy. You don't even have to know that you're ready. Caught immobile, yet you can release yourself like beach grass into the peace. Weightless, float under radiant sky, bluest shade, you don't know how or why. Notice your breath in the wind, sand, a life of moments filling your hands. Brave heart drumbeat, even while tears, pending, bending, falling for all the years of nightmares and slumbering privilege, stumbling, suffering, sorrow's blade's edge. Imagine freedom, letting go gloriously, shift between ego and humility. Shining in sync with nature so bright, open to the widest spectrum of light, you rise up in generosity to greet your true nature, moving toward the heat, leaning into the gale force strength of your courageous heart, going to any length to recreate a world where every girl and boy may know the abundance of compassion and joy.
This year's theme for Inspiration Weekend has been Courageous Heart. Kate Wallace-Rogers and Roxanne Layton have carried on this great tradition from Reverend Christy Hardwick this year. The idea of celebrating all the places that inspiration shows up in our lives. It's been a great weekend full of music and poetry and film and meditation and yoga and labyrinths. And they've done it all with absolutely no help from me because I have been sick all weekend with this nasty illness that we've been passing around to each other. But I hear it has been fabulous. And it concludes today after our worship service with the closing of the labyrinth on our front lawn and a beach cleanup. You can meet Zoe Lewis and friends on the lawn after coffee hour to join in. Part of what we are inspired to do is to care for our planet, right? I've really loved diving deep into the theme, Courageous Heart, to plan for this morning's worship service. And the first thing that I learned was that those words are intricately connected, courageous and heart. Because the word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core, a concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions that living from the center, from the heart, is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer. To encourage means to impart strength and confidence, to inspire and hearten. So the question unfolds: how do we encourage ourselves, each other, and the world? And how do we live a life centered around a courageous heart? I found 3 references to courageous heart that I want to share with you this morning. The first comes from Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield, who writes in a piece that he titled Courageous Heart, "As children, many of us were taught courage in the form of the warrior or the explorer, bravely facing danger. In the Buddhist understanding, however, great courage is not demonstrated by aggression or ambition. The courageous heart is the one that is unafraid to open to the world, to care no matter what. With compassion," he says, "we come to trust our capacity to open to life without armoring." There is a yes in compassion, Jack says, and there is also a no, said with the same courage of heart. No to abuse, no to racism, no to violence. The no is said not out of hate, but out of an unwavering care. Buddhists call this the fierce sword of compassion. So to have a courageous heart, we do not have to be warriors or explorers. In fact, one of the ways we express our courageous heart is simply by getting up in the morning, right? I mean, we don't always want to do that. It is a courageous thing to take life on each morning, to say yes or no to the various things coming our way with extraordinary speed and magnitude. Just by getting out of bed, we are courageously balancing being open and being vulnerable, taking in the world and not being overwhelmed by it, caring no matter what, but also caring for ourselves enough to know what we need as well as what the world needs. To encourage, remember, means to impart strength and confidence, to inspire and hearten. When it all seems too much, and the world is closing in, and the weight of it is heavy on my chest, and getting out of bed seems like too great a task, it is then that I listen to my courageous heart. She tells me,
"You got this. Just pull back the covers first. Let the air move around your body and see how it feels. That's not too bad, is it? You got this. One foot on the floor first. Now both. Stay here for a minute. Take your time. We have all day."
On a busy street corner in Minneapolis, you'll find a sign that says "Courageous Hearts" over the door of a converted storefront. Within the word hearts, the A, R, and T are capitalized, saying art. That's because Courageous Hearts is an art center for teens. Lindsay Waltz opens the doors of her art center every day at 3 p.m. when the schools let out, and welcomes a steady stream of young people eager to make art together. The walls are lined with shelves that overflow with paints, paper, and other supplies. Lindsay created Courageous Hearts because it was art that kept her getting out of bed after trauma rocked her life to its very core. In 2007, Lindsay was driving home from work when her car suddenly plunged into the Mississippi River far below. This was the I-35 bridge collapse that many of us watched in horror on the news 12 years ago. Waltz managed to escape her sinking vehicle, and she lived. But the experience changed her life forever. She spent 5 days in the hospital and 5 months in a brace to heal her broken back. But it took 5 years to heal her wounded heart. This she attributes to art. While she was at home recovering from her broken back, she got a community education flyer in the mail, the kind that many of us ignore or throw in the junk mail pile. But on a whim, she read it and then enrolled in a class called soul painting. The experience became a major influence on her own recovery and became the inspiration for her future career working with youth through the arts. Knowing that trauma is something that takes away our words in a lot of ways, it became really important to me to create a space where anybody could have another way to express themselves, she says. My trauma is concrete, she explains, bricks and steel. It's impersonal, which isn't the case for most people's trauma. Trauma is usually very personal. I feel this need to use my story to help illuminate the ways trauma impacts other people. Lindsay went back to school, and by the time she finished her master's degree in 2013, she had secured a space, formed a business plan, found sponsorship, and opened the door of Courageous Hearts. When the feelings swirl and my heart is bursting with emotions, excitement and joy, rage and fury, doubts and fears, love and passion and betrayal, And it feels like I might explode if I do not release, and I want to share all that I am feeling, but maybe not with conversation quite yet. I listen to my courageous heart. She tells me,
remember that paintbrush in the drawer? And the dried up paints in the closet? Remember that charcoal pencil? And those blank, empty pages of the sketch pad? Remember that new journal whose spine is not yet cracked? Remember how it feels to put your feelings onto paper? Remember how deep the color red can be. Remember how the clay doesn't talk back, but changes shape miraculously within your strong hands. Remember how good making art feels.
one more courageous heart story. In 2009, John Harrison directed a film called The Courageous Heart of Irina Sendler. It's a true story from World War II. Irina was born in 1910 near Warsaw, Poland. She was Catholic, but from an early age she felt great sympathy for the Jewish children her father treated as a doctor. When Germans invaded Poland in 1939, Irina was serving as a social worker. Horrified by what was happening in the Warsaw Ghetto, she began creating false documents for over 3,000 Jewish families, helping them to escape. As things got worse and Jewish families were being rounded up, Irina proposed a plan to begin saving Jewish children. But her fellow social workers, her parish priest, and even her mother would not help her. Undeterred, she joined the Zagota, the underground Polish resistance organization, and became head of Zagota's children's division. Irina used her special access to the Warsaw Ghetto granted to social welfare development employees to conduct inspections for typhus to set up a smuggling operation. She began secretly transporting babies and children out of the ghetto by hiding them in an ambulance with a false bottom, in baskets, in potato sacks, even in coffins. Once the children were out, Sendler arranged for them to be given false identities and placed them with Polish families or in orphanages. Still, she never gave up the hope that after the war, the children might find their families and resume their Jewish identities. In hopes of that, she kept meticulous lists of each child's real name. In the wrong hands, these documents could have been fatal to her, to the others in the network, and to the children. So Irina sealed the lists in jars and buried them. Only she knew where the information lay, waiting for the day that she could safely dig them up again. Irina rescued over 2,500 children before being arrested by the Gestapo. Although she was tortured, she never gave up the names of her accomplices. Irina was sentenced to death, but at the last moment, a guard bribed by the Polish resistance movement freed her. She escaped and lived in hiding for the rest of the war, where she continued her resistance. After the war was over, Irina dug up the jars containing the records of all the children that had been placed in hiding, but almost all of their parents had been killed. Irina Sendler passed away in 2008 at the age of 98. But today her story stands as one of the great examples of courageous heart during the Second World War, even if she never considered herself a hero. Heroes do extraordinary things, Irina once said, What I did was not an extraordinary thing. It was normal. You see a man drowning, you must try to save him, even if you cannot swim. Courage does not ask us to stop trembling, my colleague Marisol Caballero writes. It asks us to find ways to incorporate our trembles into our dance. When my belly clenches with the feeling that something just isn't right, and the words start to move up my throat with the urge to speak out, when I just can't stay silent anymore, when it's not fair or right or just, and I'm not sure what to do, when someone has hurt a friend or a stranger, or when the world itself is hurting, I long to do something for them. When I've had it with the way those in power seem to disregard those without it, and I'm mad, I listen to my courageous heart. She tells me,
You're right. That isn't fair. No one should be treated that way. Someone should say something. Hey, you are someone. Maybe it should be us, you think? I know it's scary. It's okay to be scared. I know there are still questions. We don't have to be 100% sure. If we wait for that, we might never act. Your voice matters. Hey, let's make a poster. Let's write in big letters. No, bigger. Even if only one person sees it, that's something. Who can we invite with us? Ready? You got this.
to encourage means to impart strength and confidence, to inspire and hearten. So the question unfolds: how do we encourage ourselves, each other, and the world? And how do we live a life centered around a courageous heart? My dear courageous ones, you got this. Amen, and blessed be.